Welcome to The Plunge with Derek Holser. Episode 2 in Season 1, the Human Series, continues with my guest, Sarah Kardelen. Sarah is a licensed mental health counselor and founder of Tapestry Therapy. Sarah is passionate about individual and collective liberation and desires that people experience safety and healing so that they can come home to their authentic selves and experience life-giving relationships. Sarah provides therapy, counseling, and consultation. Sarah provides therapy, advocacy, and consultation in both English and Turkish. She works with teens and adult survivors of complex trauma, specializing in domestic violence, relational issues, childhood trauma, intergenerational trauma, anxiety, and depression. Sarah is certified in Lifespan Integration Therapy and is currently the director of the Northwest Family Life Lifespan Integration Initiative. She is also a certified victim advocate and has been the Domestic Violence Advocacy Program Manager for Northwest Family Life. To learn more about Sarah, please check her out at tapestry-therapy.com. Link will be in the show notes. I am so grateful to Sarah for her time and her willingness to share with me. I'm thankful that you're here. Welcome to The Plunge. Let's dive in. I'm very, very humbled today and quite curious. Joining me is Sarah Kardelen. Sarah and I have just gotten acquainted in the last few weeks, and she was recommended for this series by my lovely wife, Leah, who is the president of the board of Northwest Family Life. And Sarah, I know we'll talk about that work in a bit. Welcome to The Plunge.
Thanks. It's great to be here. I'm honored to be here, and I look forward to exploring topics together.
Wonderful. Well, as always, I'd love to start out with your own personal journey as much as you'd like to share. You have a unique background, that's for sure, at least relative to mine, and I'd love to hear about your own formation and circumstances in life that brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I'll just share a bit of my story and along the way some things that have formed and shaped me and made me who I am. So, born and raised in Michigan, the good old Mitten State. I grew up in a family of mom, dad, and younger brother, and went to Purdue University for a year and a half, and then eventually switched to Michigan State University. And I did various different degrees. I worked on different majors along the way and ended up with the education degree. People are really important to me, and I've always wanted to come alongside of people and support them. I ended up moving to the country of Turkey and fell in love with the Turkish people, the land of Turkey, the culture of Turkey, and I taught English there. Not passionate about English, and I learned that my own English has some issues to it, and I remember students asking me, well, why is this grammar point this way? And I was like, I don't know. There's so many unique idiosyncrasies to English, but I loved teaching English because I loved helping the Turkish people understand English, and one of my passions is to be able to communicate with people. And so I loved helping people to be able to communicate more. And so when I was in Turkey, I learned how to speak Turkish, which was very challenging at first, but because I have a passion to communicate, eventually just that desire to want to communicate with people helped me to learn Turkish. I lived in Turkey for 13 years.
Wow.
It's really a part of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I'm not Turkish ethnically, I identify a lot with the culture. And so I now identify as being bicultural.
Okay.
Because the country was really formative to me. I was there during my mid to late 20s, all of my 30s. I was there. And I moved back to the US when I was 40.
Okay. Yeah, I can imagine that would be, I mean, that's such a pivotal phase.
Yeah.
Yeah, an equal influence, if not more so, because you have your own development that's occurred as you encounter that culture.
Yeah. Yeah. So then I moved back to the US when I was 40, went to grad school for 5 years. I decided okay, I'm back in the United States. Let's get our master's degree. And then I decided to get it in counseling psychology. Again, I wanted to be able to support people. And I've been deeply impacted by therapy, by receiving therapy in my life. It's been very formative for me. And so I wanted to help provide that for other people. I was also formed by therapy that was not helpful, and I think experienced some harm. And so I wanted to be able to provide effective therapy that's not harmful to people. Um,
Yeah, that's quite a such a significant responsibility.
mhm. Yes, it is because the therapy space is such a sacred space.
Hmm.
People bring their hurts and their pains and their scars and their wounds. And so I feel a high responsibility to hold that space well and make it safe and to make sure people feel supported, but also that there's space for all of their feelings, all of their identity to be there.
And can I ask a couple of
Sure.
questions about Turkey?
Yeah, please
Yeah,
do. Yeah.
yeah.
I love talking about Turkey.
Oh, good. Well, I've never been.
Okay.
I have a former student who lives over there and works over there, and I hear messages from him from time to time.
Okay.
I guess I'm curious about if you would speak to what elements of their culture resonated with you and make you come to the conclusion or the the identity that you're bicultural.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the hospitality of the culture. So I felt very welcomed by the people. I was the foreigner there, and they took me in. They received me. They accepted me, even though I was American. They shared their culture with me. They didn't force it on me, but they invited me to learn about it. So they helped me to learn how to cook in Turkish or make Turkish food. They helped me to learn how to make Turkish coffee and Turkish tea. Like, they just gave me space, but they also gave me presence. When I had questions, they would answer questions. I remember many times I would be lost and didn't know how to find the place I was going. And I'd go into a shop and they would say, "Oh, let me take you there." They wouldn't just explain it, but they would literally walk me for 10 minutes to the place I needed to go so that real sense of hospitality I've learned and I feel like is a part of me now. They really put people over projects and people over programs. And so I really learned that. Efficiency isn't necessarily the highest priority there. And so that was a real struggle for me. Growing up in a culture where you get things done and you cross things off your to-do list, right?
Well, especially, I'm not trying to impose, but I'm pretty convinced that the Midwest, the Michigan ethos is work, work, work.
It is, yeah.
Yes.
It is. The more you get done, the better you feel. And so I was really awakened that living in Istanbul specifically, which is a huge megacity, you can't always get things done because it might take you an hour and a half to get from one part of the city to the other. My efficiency was definitely softened. Um, but that was good because it softened me to be more flexible and fluid, and my expectations about life helped me to become more present and really take in life as I was living it. So those are just some of the first things that come to mind.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's something I'm always looking to do in my own life is to cultivate that balance because obviously not just in Michigan but throughout our country there's an extreme emphasis on that productivity
Yeah.
and over people and programs over people from time to time. That's for sure. I'd love to jump into because you're in the Northwest
Hmm.
now in the Seattle area and growing up in the Midwest, then Turkey, and you came, I assume you came to this area, I believe we discussed to school out here. Is that how you ended up in this area?
Correct. I wanted to go to the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology,
Hmm.
and so that's what landed me here.
Okay. And now take me through, if you don't mind, just from the transition back. Was there some culture readjustment for you?
A lot. Yeah. I feel like I got reverse culture shock, which I was not expecting.
Yeah.
It was very confusing to me. Um, Partly because I was coming back to a culture that's very different, American versus Turkish, but also Pacific Northwest, that's a little more reserved.
Hmm.
in terms of all of the US. And Turkish culture is not reserved. Like when we say hello to people in Turkey, we hug them, we kiss them on both cheeks. We are very expressive with our words and our expressions. So I remember coming back here to the United States, being in line in Costco to get a membership, and an American friend was with me, and she said, "Sarah, come back here." And I was like, "What?" And I had like walked up to the counter and stood right next to somebody at the counter, which is what you would do in Turkey because you'd be afraid somebody else would try to butt up against you and get in line before you. And I felt so shocked, like I was doing something wrong culturally,
Right.
right?
Right.
I was
Right.
infringing on their personal space. And it was so jarring to realize my sense of what is appropriate was all, confusing.
Yeah.
Another thing I remember is going to a small group meeting one time at somebody's house, and going in and feeling the desire. I wanted to go to each person and introduce myself, shake their hands, give them a hug or a kiss. And I realized when I walked in, I don't think they want me to kiss and hug them. They've never met me before.
Mm.
And so I had to really start to recalibrate.
Mm-hmm.
But I also had to go through the process of feeling like I don't need to shut down the things I've gained from Turkish culture. And so it's been a real process in the last 11 years of recalibrating, integrating who I am, and embracing my Turkish values, but also my Americanness and who I am. Yeah, so it's been a challenge, but I really feel like I've come to find myself in that.
That's beautiful. And it's interesting how, and maybe you could explain this psychologically, but how it is that, at least for me, this is my experience, as you've described, you have adopted and were adopted by the Turkish culture, and the integration, as you share the account from a place, a world away, it's actually more inviting to me. It's more of a reminder, oh yeah, this is something that I could do more of in my life. Like I'm too much of this particular heritage of Britain, Western, as you reference, like nobody can stand in lines like Brits and their descendants. Anyway,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I have a lot of British heritage in my own story too. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Well, mine's a lot of German, but culturally, it seems as though that cohort and flowing downward, we have no problem finding the line and standing in it.
Staying in it. Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
That was not my experience in visiting China. Um, I'm curious. So you've already referenced that you love helping people,
Mm-hmm.
but it's one thing to be a teacher. It's another level,
Mm.
as we've mentioned, to move to therapy, counseling in this domain. I guess how did you discover your passion for it?
Mm-hmm.
Did you have experiences that sort of sparked it? What was that like?
Yeah, that's a great question. My first time in therapy was after I lived in Turkey for a year. And I was actually back in the US, lived in the US for 4 years, but I was having trouble adjusting back to American culture, even just after living in Turkey for a year. So that initial experience of therapy was very helpful. And then the next season of my life, I did therapy. I was in Turkey and I was married to a Turkish man. And there were challenges in that relationship, a few cross cultural, but mostly, unfortunately, it was about domestic violence that I experienced in that relationship. And so during that marriage, I came across therapists that were extremely helpful. They helped me to get connected to me or reconnected to myself because I had really lost a sense of who I was in the midst of the violence, but also in the process of the marriage, experienced some couples counseling that was extremely harmful and not protective.
Mm-hmm.
So those experiences really gave me a passion for helping people who have or are experiencing domestic violence and wanting to provide them a place of safety, a place of coming back to themselves, and also a desire to want to do advocacy for people who are in DV, whether it's experiencing physical violence or not. I
Mm-hmm.
still consider it abusive, even if there's no physical violence.
Mm-hmm.
So now in my practice, I work with people that are DV victims and survivors. And I also work with a lot of people who have experienced childhood trauma.
Thank you. And thank you, Sarah, for your just openness. Know that, um, yeah, I have no words but thank you. And I also thank you and the many others who help with Northwest Family Life specifically. You know, as I mentioned, my wife is on the board there, and I served a term many years ago. And you mentioned that you help people with childhood trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious about, as we talk about, so, you know, again, the series formation, identity, intimacy, sexuality, all of those things, I see them as inextricably linked. And I'm curious about the aspect of childhood experiences, early childhood experiences, and how you see them as perhaps affecting personality development and the way then that person engages with the world
Mm-hmm.
going forward in life.
Mm-hmm.
Could you speak to that?
Sure. The first 2 to 3 years are extremely formative, almost to the point of setting a sense of a template for our life in terms of how we relate to people. Specifically, if we think of the topic of attachment, those first 2 or 3 years really set a tone for how we will attach or not attach to people. And that really sets a trajectory, I guess is a better word for it, on what will our future romantic relationships look like? What will our future friendships look like? So I found in my practice and working with people that we find ways to adapt and have maladaptive ways of dealing with things from those first 2 years. So, for example, if someone comes from a family where there's at least one secure person who's able to be there for the child, respond to their needs a good amount of the time, not all the time, but is able to be there consistently with them, but also provide some space for them to be able to learn all those developmental things, then that child is more likely to have more of a secure attachment style. But if a child is in a family where there's a lot of abuse, abandonment, or hypercriticalness, that child's going to grow up with more of an insecure attachment style where they might withdraw in relationships or they may be super anxious in relationships and be
Mm,
hypervigilant.
mm,
Or they might be a mixture of both of those things, move away, but then move towards. And so in my work, I get to help them to go back and work with those ego states of when they weren't getting their needs met. And I help them bring their current self, their adult self, back into those memories and to provide what they didn't get back then. So it's the client helping to heal themselves. And I get to be like a guide along that journey to help them to experience that.
Could I follow up? I'm curious, you used the term the ego states
Yeah,
that is connected or involved with that attachment or lack thereof and the response. Could you speak a little more to what that term means?
sure. So the predominant modality in therapy that I do is lifespan integration.
Okay.
So we talk about ego states. We don't talk about people having different parts, but we talk about, for example, when you were 2 years old and you were learning how to do something, maybe some trauma happened and there was fragmentation caused to yourself in that state. So you have this memory, maybe your first memory when you were 2, 3, 4 years old of something really bad happening to you. So we would say that that ego state received trauma, was injured, was hurt in some way. And so the way our psyche or our nervous system deals with that trauma is to fragment away from that person that they are. And so we get to come back in and work with that ego state, work with the client that they were in that memory.
Huh. And that kind of ties into what I was going to touch on next, but I'd love for you to give maybe a little bit of history and a little bit of the practical application of the methodology or modality that you use. And you said that's lifespan integration?
Correct. Yeah. So Lifespan Integration was created by Peggy Pace, who's a therapist from the Pacific Northwest. And it's been around for around 25 years or so. And it's gone through different transitions over the years, but it's amazing. I've experienced myself. I've been doing it for the last 4 years as a client myself. It's helped me to heal from my own history of domestic violence. It's helped me to heal from childhood trauma. It helps to create a solid sense of a core, of a self, like who I am. And it really helps us to connect to our authentic selves, like who we truly are. So I think of it as helping my clients come home to themselves and who they are, and experiencing transformation. So healing from the traumas, but also growing a greater, deeper sense of who I am and that I can feel safe within me. Knowing that we live in a world that feels very unsafe. If we can find a sense of safety within ourselves, that helps us to ground. And so when I think of integration, I think of connection. So I like to use this example of the Matryoshka dolls.
Sure.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So when we think of ego states, we can think of this is the 2-year-old, this is the 13-year-old, and this is me, my 50-something-year-old here, right? All of those ego states are always there all of the time, but maybe they're not always connected because trauma causes the fragmentation. So I might feel kind of fragmented and that these parts aren't connected together, right? So let's say I'm in my car and all of a sudden something reminds me of that car accident I was in when I was 10 years old. All of a sudden I have a flashback, but I literally feel 10 years old. So it's that ego state in me that's being reminded of that memory. And so if that ego state is not integrated, I'm going to feel 10. But what if I went in and I were to resolve that trauma? Then I could feel like, oh, I remember that trauma, but because I'm attached, I still feel like I'm in my 50s. I remember that memory, but I don't feel like I'm in that memory.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a definite difference when you help someone resolve the trauma. They can remember it, but they don't go into fight, flight, or freeze. They can stay, we would say they stay in their window of tolerance, and they can stay present with themselves and stay present in the moment.
Oh, that's interesting because, yeah, I would imagine the non-integrated expression would lead to reaction that is indicative of a 10-year-old as
Right,
opposed
right,
to, right? And of course, all the consequences that would follow from that the persons who are on the receiving end of that reaction have no knowledge of the history.
right.
They only see a 50-year-old
Yeah,
behaving like a 10-year-old.
right. Exactly. And then it can create so much confusion for the
Mm-hmm.
people around the person there in that situation. And so that's why I love the work that I get to do because it helps people reduce their reactivity.
Mm-hmm.
It helps them to feel their age, right?
Right.
Another example I use is a fishing net. So when we think of someone who doesn't experience and have a lot of integration, it's like they have lots of holes in their fishing net.
Mm-hmm.
And so when difficult things happen, it might feel like there's a hole and you fall through the hole in the fishing net. But through integration, there's more and more connection.
Mm-hmm.
And the fishing net is full and it can hold whatever is happening in your life. Another example is a trampoline. If you think of a trampoline that you're jumping on, what if it has lots of holes in it? And so you get reminded of a traumatic memory, and it's like you fall down that hole and it's hard to get back up. You might feel stuck,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
But
Yeah.
if they have a nervous system that's really connected and integrated, when they get reminded of that trauma and it's integrated into the story, then they can bounce back up. They can experience the resilience, and feel like they're not sinking, not freezing, not being as reactive to it.
Hmm. Okay, boy, this, I'm curious. So one of the challenges I have with this programming is staying on course, but
Sure.
students love me because if they got Professor Holster on a rabbit trail, then the rest of the class content is just put off.
Yeah,
Um, that's okay. I do want to ask, with respect to a word you used as well earlier, fragmentation.
sure. Yeah.
And I've also heard a term, and this is more Hollywood perhaps, of fracturing. And I think of films or stories or accounts where a person
Mm.
had experienced such severe trauma, and maybe that's just their degrees of the same thing, or is there a way to differentiate that? Because
Mm.
I think of in particular a movie of late, last decade called Split, which was an M. Night Shyamalan film, and he does suspense, not really horror, but some stuff gets a little graphic, but where a character has a bunch of alternate
I
identities,
see.
right? And they actually embody them and talk as them and move about and do things where one element of that person's fractured nature does something and it's not good, and the other, as when they're back as themselves, they're unaware that they did it. I don't know
Yeah.
how much of that's Hollywood, etc., but I'm just curious, is that the line of thinking that the fragmentation is touching on?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say it's about dissociation. And
Okay.
when I think of dissociation, I think of distance from the core self. And so I would say there's usually a degree of dissociation where we would talk about highway hypnosis, when you're in the car and all of a sudden you just kind of like feel like you're drifting off, and then you realize, "Oh my gosh, 10 minutes went by. What happened?"
Yes.
Like you lost track of time. So that's very minimal dissociation. Whereas what I mentioned before, when you were 10 years old and the car accident happened, and then I'm
Hmm.
driving and I get reminded of that, for a second, I'm going back into that memory. So for a split second, I might be dissociative,
Hmm.
but might not be so fragmented, like away from myself.
Hmm.
But if we go down the spectrum, we get to the point where somebody has DID, dissociative identity disorder. It used to be called multiple personalities disorder, right? And that's someone who's experienced pretty extreme trauma, usually complex, meaning it wasn't just one moment of trauma, it was trauma that happened over a period of time,
Hmm.
where there was so much damage done to the psyche that for the person to stay alive, they felt like they had to separate into different identities.
That, yeah, I'm familiar with that. I think, man,
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious. Last question on this topic. When that car accident flashback
Mm-hmm.
happened or happens for a person with this dynamic, are they aware that they're, because you're saying, they're still proximate to their core identity. Are they even aware that they're behaving or responding as the 10-year-old? Is it that awareness in their brain, or is it just an instinct?
It depends on the person. It
Okay.
depends on, I think, how integrated they are, how quickly they might become aware of what's happening. If
Mm.
someone doesn't have a lot of integration, it's going to maybe take them a while longer to realize what just happened to them. Whereas somebody who has experienced maybe a secure attachment and has grown up being able to be more integrated, they're going to, in a sense, come back to the present moment quicker, because they have more of that safety net, that fishing net there to hold them and make them feel safe. But if somebody hasn't experienced as much integration, it could take some more time for them to wrestle through, like, why am I so confused? Why am I acting like a 10-year-old?
That makes sense. Thank you for all of that. That makes me want to do some reading to learn more about this. I'd love to talk, drawing back from the lifespan integration specificity, but just psychologically, even physiologically. I know that that's a component of all of this. Whatever you'd like to speak to, just as a person listening thinks about the ways that their unique culture and family and society and finally spirituality,
Mhm.
those different aspects, I guess you could say, and I'm sure they overlap, obviously. But how do those play a part in an individual's life and their own identity for who they are as they move from that childhood state to an independent person?
Yeah, I would say it's all connected, right? The physiological, the physical, the emotional, the spiritual. It's all interconnected. And I like to think of I use the word intersections. They intersect with each other. So if we want to talk about personality, ability, gender, race, spirituality, those are all aspects of our identity.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times society puts those identities on us,
Mm-hmm.
right? You are born into a Christian family, therefore you are Christian. You were born in the United States, therefore you're American. You're born as this gender or that gender. So it's not, people don't ask you, how do you feel? You're given that identity. I found in my own life, being able to live in another country has helped give me some space to ask some questions, to be curious about who am I? What
Mm.
religion do I really believe in? What do I feel is truth? How do I identify in terms of sexuality and gender, race? What does that mean for me? Nationality. So I'm not sure what else
Yeah,
to
yeah. Well,
expand
no, that's really helpful. I'm thinking about the example in your own life of the distance that Turkey provided you to grant you the space, the objectivity to, as you describe it, ask yourself who are you really? I would say perhaps even go further and say, who would I choose to be if
exactly.
I was not just dropped into this environment and, I'm a baby. I have no idea what's what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Living in Turkey gave me that perspective. It shook me up to cause me to look at and to see different things. So, one thing specifically is when I moved back to the States, I felt like I had different eyes to see things, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
see myself or see other people. And so, all of a sudden, I was seeing things I never saw before. I saw injustices, whether it was about being a woman in the United States, I saw that more. I saw injustices about racial profiling that I was never aware of, injustices about lots of things. And I never had those eyes to see that before. And so I started asking really difficult, critical questions and my own identity in terms of what does it mean to be a white person in the United States. And I started doing my own work around that and was grieved to become aware of my own racistness in some ways and had to wrestle through that and do my own work and continue to do my own work around that just to become aware of that and then to learn how to continue to grow in that. But being a minority in Turkey as an American and as a Christian gave me a felt sense of what it means to not be in the majority. And so I was able to come back here and to still hold that felt sense of what does it mean to be a minority or not part of the majority. Um, and so I'm thankful for the opportunity to have different eyes now to see.
Thank you. It begs the question for me, because obviously the vast majority of us are not going to spend a decade abroad or more. But there are plenty of people who have questions popping up in their mind. They have doubts, they have thoughts, right? And there's two things that come to mind for me is first of all, depending upon the environment and its openness to curiosity, you might, if you give voice to anything, you're an outcast because you're threatening not only the structure, but you're also threatening, in many cases, this is my perception as I have asked my own questions about my spirituality and theology that I was raised with, that it's a threat to those individuals' identity because they still think of themselves as all those things that I am now distancing myself from and in their eyes rejecting, even though I'm just asking questions. Right? Everyone has experienced this in some way in their life, I am sure. And so you have that element going on. I'm just thinking of listeners to this conversation. If you feel that way in the environment you're in, if you have any counsel along those lines, and then also, how does one go about cultivating an environment where they can explore, as you got to do,
Yeah.
without going to Turkey?
Right, for 10 years, 15.
Right. How does one can one develop habits and practices that allow them to continue to evolve and actually choose, you know what? I do dismiss this idea or this ideology that I just took for granted and move forward.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I would use the idea of like we need to do our own work,
Hmm.
right? And not expect other people to do the work for us. So as a white person, I need to do my own work about what does it mean to be white. I can't expect my black and brown brothers and sisters to help me with that. That's not their responsibility. So what we specifically can do as white folks, we can read books about white fragility or our white identity or the new Jim Crow or things like that, my grandmother's hands. We can read these books, but not just read them cognitively, to really digest them and to read them slowly, chapter by chapter, and then to reflectively read them about, well, what does that chapter mean for me? How does my life intersect with what they're talking about? And then another way to do the work is to talk about it with somebody else, to be in dialogue with it is really, really important. So to do a book study with some friends that you feel safe with, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
you can be vulnerable with. A next step would be to like bring that topic to your therapist and say, I'm really wrestling with this. This is really uncomfortable to talk about racism or my personal identity as a woman, and to be able to dig in, what does that mean for you? Like, why are you questioning that? Why is that hard? But then start asking yourself questions and find people that are safe to ask questions to or with. Because I think it's all about being curious
Mm-hmm.
and feeling secure enough to ask the hard questions.
Hmm. And can I ask, I'm a little off track, but
Okay.
we can take it out, leave it, whatever. I would imagine, I have my own aspects of trauma. I am grateful I have, not experienced anything physically intense or harmful to the extent that I know so many of the clients that come through Northwest Family Life
Hmm.
doors have. I'm curious because you said about doing the work. Would you say that it ties in a little bit in terms of the even ability to start to try to do the work, your personal safety?
Totally. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I know that's kind of a no-brainer, but I'm just picturing people who are holding so much inside. It kind of, I mean, it's getting me a little emotional because it's heartbreaking to think and to imagine how many millions of people around the world are holding things inside like this, and it's so their whole existence is survival. Yeah, I don't even know where I'm going with that. It's just what came to mind as you talk about. I guess it's reflecting in my own life on the privilege I have that I actually can do the work. And again, that would connect to my physicality as a man. Like I don't experience physical threat for safety
Right.
in any way remotely like so many women do. And that's just one aspect. But anyway, I don't know where I was going, Sarah.
Yeah. Hmm.
I'm just saddened by it.
Yeah. Thank you for your vulnerability and connecting to that topic.
Yeah.
One response I have is the word privilege that you mentioned. And when I think of privilege, I think of responsibility. So people that have more privilege, I think, also have more responsibility to be aware of that privilege, to utilize it for the sake of people that don't have the privilege, but also to do the work. So the fact that you do feel safe means that you have more space to do the work. Whereas if there's somebody who's an immigrant, a person of color, maybe socioeconomically is not so well off, they are possibly in more of a survival mode. They don't have the capacity to do as much quote unquote work. But I
Mm-hmm.
want to be careful with that word too, because the work isn't just in therapy and cognitively too. I'm just like thinking through that for myself right now.
Mm-hmm.
But when we are not in survival mode, I think we have more safety to go deeper and dig deeper in our stories and to wrestle with things more. Where if there's somebody in domestic violence, it's not even wise for them to dig deep right into their story. They need to get safe first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think you can tell me if I'm on the right track, but as you use the word work, the thought that comes to mind is education,
Mm-hmm.
reflection, introspection, and application. Those are just terms that kind of a process that comes to mind. Maybe it's the teacher in me, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I'm gonna just let that sit. The did you have something else? I'm sorry.
No, no.
Okay.
Uh-uh.
Um, I would like to discuss now. We've talked about the formation and the identities and the multiplicity of identities, and even whether or not they're actually chosen by us or given to us. What we do with that. How do these aspects influence now a person's relationships with others? And I know that's, again, a no-brainer, but I'd love just to hear your thoughts on that.
So how do our different aspects of our identity impact our current relationships? Yeah, I think it impacts who we choose to be in relationship with, for example,
Hmm.
who we feel like we can be in relationship with.
Could I interject? You use the word choose, and I'm curious if do we feel like that conscious decision, or is it a instinctual thing that has been shaped by because I often hear about like I'll have conversations. I'll make it personal. I'll have conversations with my wife, and because of our different journeys in life, the word that we use is there are different people that we become close to outside of our home, and I will always be
Mm,
surprised by some that she is good friends with, as she will be by the ones I am good friends with.
mm,
And the term we'll use with one another is, you have more grace for that type of person than I do.
mhm.
Vice versa. I don't know if that's hitting on at all what you're talking about, but I can't help but think in the friends that I end up with. I guess the word choose is a tough one for me because I feel like I just sort of vibe with this person.
Mhm.
And they might be unhealthy. Like,
Mm,
but am I on the right
I
track?
think so. Yeah. I think our experiences as a kiddo
Yeah.
wire us, like literally we have the internal wiring to fit with some other people, right?
Hmm.
Whether for it's for our good or not. So we will continue to reenact those patterns until they get worked through, I think.
Hmm.
So when it comes to being in like abusive relationships, we're bound to get into another abusive relationships. We're bound to get into another relationship unless some of that trauma is reprocessed and some of that neurological wiring gets rewired.
Wow.
So I think a part of who we're in relationship with now is because of our childhood, because of our experiences, and what was created as normal in our childhood feels familiar. So we're going to gravitate towards what feels familiar. It might not be healthy, but if it feels familiar, then in some ways we feel safe, right?
Yes.
And so the growth is is, are we willing to do the work to like recalibrate, rewire our nervous systems so that what is healthy can become familiar?
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. I so often I will hear the sort of idea on the flip side of like sabotaging if a person has not experienced healthy, positive dynamics,
Yeah.
they will, when they have the opportunity to, they will sabotage it, whether or not they're doing it on purpose, because
Right.
it is so unfamiliar. I think another word for safe might be just that it's known. Like the old adage, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't, because you're so. Well, you used a word early on that I really appreciated with there being anxious, I don't know if it's fragility. Anyway, like when you're constantly vulnerable, how you can't rest. Vigilant. That was the word you
Hyper
used.
vigilant. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, um, so when you think of dating, for example, after an abusive relationship or even just a challenging relationship, we might feel really, really protective of ourselves. So it makes it hard to like let the guard down and to start trusting or building relationships again.
I'd love to explore now in terms of intimacy. If a person has experienced a violation of trust, and I know like that's a very broad
Hmm.
outcome. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, you could say you're going to be somewhere and not show up as opposed to, domestic violence. I mean, this is a big spectrum. Just generally, a person wants to restore trust. What's that process like for a person who has broken trust and vice versa in that
Yeah.
dynamic if the desire is to reconcile?
Yeah. So I think of the concept of rupture and repair. So when the trust has been broken, there's been a rupture. That relationship is broken. And the only way to connect the two people again is for there to be repair. So just like you break your arm, you need to go back in, you need to reset it. It needs the cast on there, it needs time to heal. And then even when it needs to like continue to grow and be strengthened. So, what's going to show the change is the change in behavior, right? So, like, let's say a partner cheats on somebody, then it's the changed behavior and the person that did the cheating that's going to show that they're different and that they've changed. A lot of times we give lip service. I'm sorry, I won't do it again. But that actually doesn't do the repair. The repair is seeing the changed behavior, is seeing the person walk out that they're dealing with their stuff, that they're going to therapy, that they're acting different. So the rupture and repair needs to happen. And people taking responsibility is super, super important and not blaming somebody else for the cheating, for
Mm.
example.
Mm-hmm.
I did this because you didn't do this, or I did this because that's just who I am, right? It's about taking responsibility for what happened and why it happened. I like to remember like I'm 100% responsible for me and I'm responsible for my response
Mm.
and you're responsible for your response, right? And that gives us space to actually interact and connect on.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes, not always, trust can be rebuilt, but sometimes it can't, is my personal take. When you
Yeah.
think of a piece of glass or maybe a mirror, if you
Mm-hmm.
break it, it's going to be broken. You can come back together and you can glue it together, but you're still going to see all the cracks, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it can become a mosaic, right?
Right.
And it's like, what are you using as the glue to put those pieces back together again? And it would take time to meld it back together again.
Yeah. So your mirror turning into a mosaic, I like that. One of the things, is wired in me is a hopeful outcome. I love to cheer on the underdog. I believe that, things can be redeemed and reconciled. I don't diminish all the effort that required to make that a reality. But I also think of the art. We've got a friend who does it. I'm not going to try to pronounce it, but the Japanese art of repairing vases with gold.
Right.
And you expressed the glue that puts that mirror back together. And I'm curious, taking that metaphor a little further, what are some examples of good glue that would actually make that mirror become a mosaic, and so that the beauty is even enhanced in spite of the cracks?
Right. So, for example, again, if one partner cheats on the other, some of the glue could be the partner that's the cheater says, I realized I've hurt you, and I realize that the impact has been X, Y, and Z. And like actually naming the harm and naming the hurt and naming the impact versus just saying, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one line of glue, right, that could be put down. Another line is to be consistent and show up for the partner. Like just that consistency in relationship, that could be another line of glue. Doing things that differently, like the changed behavior, could be another line of glue. So it's not just like one thing, but it's another way of being and interacting.
Yeah, it's interesting because conversation I've had with another guest on this series with respect to those behaviors and sort of the habits that actually are part of why the violation of trust happened in the first place, tracing those back to thought patterns and responses that are all internal, even before behavior has manifested in cheating or whatever the conduct is. Like going back and being able to focus when some of those thoughts reappear that sort of developed the pattern that the person had operated in,
Yeah.
that led to the violation.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are complex,
So
aren't we?
complex. Yeah. There's so much we could explore in all of these topics too.
Yes. Well, I'm grateful. I just have one question. It's not an easy or simple one, of course. None of them are. I want to express again, Sarah, my gratitude for your time to share with me and with the listeners, but also for all you're doing in the community that we live in with Northwest Family Life and giving of yourself. One of the questions, actually, I do have a second one. I forgot.
Okay.
So we
Sure.
have two more.
Okay, sure.
Before you know what? I'm going to go this way. I'm going to go with the question I was going to ask, and then I'll go back to the last one. I'm reminded of it. But I want to talk about shame and guilt and the way that shapes our ideas around sexuality. And if you would speak to, if you'd like to, how that shows up in your practice and what helps people move through them.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, we all experience shame and guilt, and it's really hard because it feels so heavy. And when we feel shame, we want to hide. We don't want it to be seen. We want to be silent about it. We don't want people to know. But it's actually by bringing those things that make us feel shameful into the light, where there can be vulnerability, that's when the healing can happen. So how I experience it with my clients is with doing lifespan integration, we use timelines to work with people. And so there might be certain memories on somebody's timeline that evokes a sense of shame for a person. And if I can help that client figure out what is the belief about themselves that is causing the shame. So, for example, the belief might be I am too much, or I'm not enough, or I am to blame. But those beliefs actually come from, unfortunately, our parents, a lot of times, how they treated us. So let's say I have a belief that I'm too much, and so I feel shame about that. So something happens in my life now, and that belief gets triggered. And I feel, again, shame. So I'm going to want to shrink down, be quiet, not say anything. What I get to do with my clients is work with that belief and acknowledge, like, that's a belief that you've adapted to out of survival. But now we can help to bring perspective to it So there's a specific protocol that we use in lifespan integration to address that. And I found as we work with those different beliefs, our nervous systems can kind of loosen up around some of those beliefs, and my clients don't hold so rigidly to them. And they experience a relief or a release of shame around that. And they realize, actually, that's not true. I'm not too much. I'm just right. I'm not perfect, but I'm okay being me. I'm not too much. I'm not enough. And so I love just seeing the relief on people's faces when that insight happens. And I think the insight happens when the literal neural pathways change and shift. And so I get to see that in my work.
Wow. Huh. That's fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. And now I want to conclude with, as I express my gratitude to you and the work that you do and the work that your team does and colleagues and so many others, I would love to know if you could speak to some ways for therapists themselves to remain in a healthy place while helping clients navigate these deeply traumatic events. And it can be your own practices or just general, advice, but I think that that would be a wonderful way to conclude our conversation on, and perhaps would help even lay people in their own relationships where they're navigating tough things to be able to protect and preserve their peace.
Yeah, that's a great question. To be able to continue on with life and be able to stay in the work that we do, we have to take care of ourselves, right? But I think about, am I taking care of myself in all aspects of my life? And so for me, it's been easy to focus on 2 or 3 aspects of my life, but not on the third or the fourth aspect. So I found it really important to focus on the spiritual, the mental, the social, the physical. So we can ask the questions, am I caring for myself well in all of those areas? 2, do I have practices that regularly help me in all of those areas? 3 is, how is my nervous system? So specifically for therapists, when we're in the room with our clients, there's a sense of my nervous system's interacting with their nervous system. And if I'm on high alert, if I'm in fight or flight, and not within my window of tolerance, my client's going to be picking up on that. And so I encourage, even admonish other therapists to do the nervous system work. Pick your modality, but to do the work on your nervous system so that you can sit across from your client and you can be able to stay within your window of tolerance, even when your client brings up these huge traumas. Can you stay in your window of tolerance so that you can be responsive and be present with them, so that you can continue to dialogue with them and offer that safety to them? But if our nervous systems aren't able to do that, we can't fully help them in the way they need it. And so I've found what's helped me as a therapist is to do my own nervous system work, and experiencing the healing from my trauma, and building a greater sense of connection to my authentic self.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah's wise words and great counsel. Could I ask you to just, if there's any details with respect to Northwest Family Life, if people are interested in supporting people, maybe somebody that needs help, what are the ways to connect?
Do a Google search of Northwest Family Life. We have our website. If you know of somebody that needs a therapist, there's a directory of therapists there. You can reach out to our resources. We have a resource list on there. If somebody needs advocacy, we can help guide you in the right direction to find advocacy, whether it's a safe place, whether it's resources. We have a safe home called Penny's Place, and that's where women and children can come and stay. It's a transitional housing, but it's a really unique place where people live in community together, and they experience individual healing, but also collective healing, which I love. So there's that we offer just a lot of different services, and so we also do thrive on the gifts of people, donors, and so there's ways on our website that people can give financially and invest in the lives of survivors.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. And as a donor, I continue to encourage other people. There's hardly a work that compares with what Northwest Family Life is doing to end the cycle of domestic violence and to provide an opportunity for young people to come up in an environment that does not splinter them into a million pieces, but can help them become integrated as we're all seeking to be. Thank you so much, Sarah.
No problem. Could I add in one more resource?
Of
I
course.
just want to give props to Project Be Free, which is another nonprofit organization that Northwest Family Life is connected to. They do amazing advocacy work. They do ride-alongs with law enforcement to respond to domestic violence calls. They provide advocacy. They have DV support groups for victims and survivors. They just provide so many resources. They're truly first responders, and so encourage people to do a Google search on Project Be Free. Their advocates are people of color. Their staff, their board members are all people of color. Many of their advocates and therapists are bilingual in Spanish and English. A lot of the advocates speak other languages too. So that's another huge resource in the Washington area.
Amazing. Man, so many heroes out there, Sarah, and you're one of them, so thank you.
Thank you.
Today's episode is sponsored by the word patience. 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 An attribute that we all are challenged to maintain in many situations in life. But today I think it's particularly important that patience be applied to our own self and our own growth as we recover and reform from the different ways in which we've experienced challenges, even trauma, heartache, heartbreak. Patience, the capacity to accept or tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering without getting angry or upset. You know, I don't know that you need any more of a definition. So I just want to encourage you to reflect and have patience with those around you naturally, but most of all, again, with yourselves. Life is a long, long journey, and you never know where the road may lead. But can I encourage you to be willing to take the time, to make the time, to reflect, understand that we're all just a work in progress. And the vast majority of us are doing our best to figure it out with not a whole lot of help. So be patient with yourself. Thank you, Patience, for sponsoring today's episode of The Plunge.